All right, so I think this was a good Voyager week.
I had a good week this week. I liked whatever Prime Factors was. I don't understand why it was called that, but we'll, I guess, talk about it. I like that episode
I
better.
think because they both had their own version of the Prime Directive. That was my interpretation.
Oh, okay. That actually makes sense. I was thinking it was going to be a mathy episode. Certainly, I think that one was deeper. Well, let's talk about Emanations, because I think we talk about a lot of episodes, especially in DS9, as, oh, this is DS9 telling this episode's story or picking up a theme or whatever. This episode reminded me a lot of Half a Life, which is one of my favorite TNG episodes.
Okay.
Given that it is about the Federation dealing with a culture whose rituals surrounding death are extraordinarily different, are almost opposite in some ways, and basically that clash between two different belief systems that both hold very dear. That said, I think I like Half a Life's treatment of it much better, and I think that exposes certain weaknesses in the... Half a Life ends with a very respectful, if not understanding, then acceptance of this other culture and belief systems in a way that feels very Trek. I don't feel that that's earned in this episode, and that, I guess, made me a little uncomfortable with the ending.
I think you're right. I mean, I like both of these episodes, like I said,
Yeah.
but I think that Prime Factors is much better than Emanations, and actually I was really shocked at how impressed by that episode I was, because as I mentioned at the end of last week's episode, I had absolutely no recollection of it, and I don't remember. I think I saw it because I vaguely recalled the Belgian/French alien who was macking on Janeway. But Emanations, I think you're right. Like, Half a Life worked, of course, because we had a connection with this character of, and I don't remember the guy's name, but we had a connection with him through Loaxana Troy. Now,
because she liked him, we like him by extension.
Right. And, people have different opinions of Loaxana Troy, and that's fine. Although if you don't like her, you're wrong. But Emanations, I think, is a weaker episode because, well, number one, we don't know Harry Kim as well as Loaxana Troy, which is an odd thing to say, but true, I think, because we don't. Fair. I mean, we've seen, 7 episodes of the show at this point?
And in a way, just as we like what's his name from Half a Life through Loaxana, we like Loaxana through Deanna Troy, who we do see every single week.
That is true as well, yeah. So we don't have that sort of third degree of separation, I guess.
That dude is basically our stepfather, by extension.
Right. And I think that one of the reasons why Emanations, I think the part of Emanations that works for me is all of the character interactions among the crew and their, I liked, we'll talk about Chakotay, we'll talk about Harry Kim, of course. I feel as though the episode works because it gives us more insight into what our main characters believe and how they're going to react to situations. Yeah. And I don't feel like the alien culture in Emanations was that well sketched out. Now, part of that, of course, I think is because it was a much more ambitious attempt than Half a Life.
Yeah.
Because Half a Life was a assisted suicide allegory. It was a sort of Logan's Run thing, only with older people. We kind of got that already. They didn't have to do a lot of the groundwork to establish that as a concept.
And they also, I would say, do a good job at establishing why this We Kill You at 60 is established as a way of giving dignity, so that way you don't topple into, that you're right, this one doesn't.
Yeah, and it's funny, it's interesting to me because this was written by Brian and Braga, and one of the things that I think is interesting about Emanations is you can kind of see Braga episodes have always struck me as a little darker, as a little grimmer than some of the other writers that wrote for TNG specifically. And with Emanations, I think that it is the case where he established this alien culture. I mean, basically they've established this fiction of their culture that people are going off and going to this wonderful afterlife. And so it's not really a problem that they're dying. I mean, what we're talking about, in effect, is a entire society that is a suicide cult.
Well, yeah, you have most Christian religions, Catholicism in particular, have a prohibition against suicide, because if heaven is so great, why the fuck am I here?
Right.
And this one, I think this, in a way, it's attempting to be a very dark take on Fluffy Cloud Heaven, where I see Grandma and Grandpa again, and but without that prohibition against suicide. The second things are going a little bit wrong, you're going to kill yourself because, all right, well, I'll start again. I'll be back where there's no problems.
Yeah, and I think that the episode doesn't quite establish that to the level that I would like it to. Now, that's not to say that it's a necessarily a criticism of the episode. I think that, again, really the point of Emanations is to show us how green Harry Kim is and how not good at first contact situations he is. And we'll certainly talk about that. But, to kind of get the alien culture out of the way, because, of course, this is what Voyager is shaping up to be. It's just shaping up to be, we've had this alien culture of the week. Here's what they are. We're getting back to more of a TNG style thing where they just go to this planet and they have to establish it very quickly. And I don't know if this... I feel like this episode is probably about as good as some early episodes of TNG in terms of establishing the alien culture.
I mean, as a baseline, we are much better than first season TNG ever was.
Oh, yeah.
Which I do want to stress that. I don't think this is a bad show at all.
No. I mean, it's fine. And I think that one of my challenges with Voyager especially is kind of changing my critical approach to it, because with DS9, we didn't have these alien cultures of the week for the most part. That was a show that was delving into world building of just a select few alien cultures and characters in a real way. And this is not that.
In the few times we did have an alien culture of the week, it was they're another subject of the Dominion kind of a thing. It was tied into the larger plot.
Yeah, and I think that key to this episode, I think why it works for me, is the performances by I don't remember any of their names. I think one of his names was Adele. Sure, Adele. That's fine. Adele is in this alien culture.
I'm making a new album. What can I name it? I'll just put my age. There we go. I mean, have some creativity, lady.
She has all her creativity in her music. That's where she keeps it, I guess. I don't want to talk about Adele. But the performance by the guy who is not the guy who plays Lanier in Babylon 5 but looks bizarrely like him is quite good. I think they're able to establish...
The one with the bum leg.
The one with the bum leg, exactly. who appears to be like 45.
Well, here... See, I at first I was saying, like, it doesn't seem like he's that bad off. Like, it just seems like he has some... moderate pain, he's not going to be a good day laborer, but he can probably, and especially when at the end he's like, well, I'm going to go into the mountains and hide out. And I'm like, if you're that bad off, but then I think part of the implication is that, it's like a horse gets a horse breaks his leg. Well, we're going to shoot him, that's the kind, that's medicine in this place. So this guy
right.
This guy has, pain when it rains. Oh, we gotta kill him.
Well, I guess, that's kind of the thing, though. I agree with that, because this alien culture really does seem to be that taken to its logical extreme where, if you do believe that you are going to this wonderful place after you die, okay, well, I have this disease or I have a problem with my leg that is never going to go away. Yeah. So, all right, I guess it's time to check out. I mean, I don't think that it's as bad as like I have a headache and I'm going to go kill myself, but it does seem to me that the baseline level of this is a medical condition that I would like to die now is extremely low in this culture.
Well, I mean, how many times have you had when you're just really fucking sick and you're like, oh my God, I want to die? Like, okay, in that culture, we know that, all right, we'll get better from this. But yeah, that's basically where they are, which you're right. I don't know if the series is prepared to go as dark as all of that, which is a shame because, for example, The Quickening, I think, went as dark as it ought to have.
Yeah.
It showed how fucked up and horrible this society would be, how depressing, how demoralized. And
I think part of that as well is that The Quickening did have a larger palette to work from.
Yeah.
This is, the quickening again is a town, right? And yeah, we only see a few people, but it is a more expansive thing. They're outside. They were able to get a bunch of extras. They were able to do something with costuming and props and things like that. Whereas,
and again, they were tying it to the Dominion and showing how cruel the Dominion is, so they could twist it as much as they wanted to.
And the Vinians are like 2 rooms.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't really get a good sense of what even their buildings look like, what their clothes really are like, because of course it would be, it would seem like an obvious sort of thing that the clothes that we're seeing in this episode are very sort of ceremonial.
Yeah, and everybody is obsessed with death in this particular cast because they're at the Thanatarium or whatever. If they were, somebody in an office building who is perfectly healthy is probably having a very different day.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's interesting to me because the episode has a lot of attention to detail, which I really like. But I don't know that it knows, what to do with those details in terms of telling a larger story of what this culture would be like. And, the episode is trying to do a few different things, so I'm not necessarily criticizing it. I mean, I did like it. But yeah, you're right. It's not for an idea which has its roots in something that is what we would consider to be, I don't know if immoral, I mean, amoral. I don't know. It's not as though these people are really being pushed to do this. I mean, certainly there's some element of coercion here, perhaps. I don't know.
I get the sense, though, that Deep Throat's belief is very genuine.
I'm glad you picked up that was the guy who played Deep Throat, by the way.
I mean, he seems genuine about this. Yes, he's worried that Harry Kim will cause everybody's society, cause society to collapse. But I think that for the most part, the people on this planet genuinely believe this, genuinely do,
Yeah.
All of this. It's not like they're killing people for evil reasons. Again, maybe not quite as justified as in Half a Life, which we come to accept. Again, these aren't our ways, but they're not. It's not evil ways or anything.
Yeah, sure. And I also think that the other maybe this is a structural, not a problem with the episode, but this is the reason why it feels a bit like a closed room mystery, is that it is a closed room mystery. I mean, Voyager is not there. Only Harry Kim is there.
Yeah.
And so we're only seeing 1 or 2 rooms. We're only meeting a few of these aliens because that's who Harry Kim is meeting and seeing. It's not a Half a Life situation. It's not a quickening situation. It's this situation. It's an emanation situation.
Yeah.
So we're not getting a good full picture of what the society is like because nobody on Voyager knows knows the answer to that question.
Yeah, the reason only anybody Janeway and the crew are getting one half of the story, really. Kim's getting the other. They only figure out what went on after the events of the episode, after they revive Harry Kim, and they have a very long conversation.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of like you get the 2 sides of it, of course, because you have the guy who Harry Kim is with, and he's telling him a very particular story about what the culture is like and what sort of his family is like, and then you're getting the other side of it, which is this woman that Voyager accidentally sucks up, and they revive her, and she's freaked the fuck out because why wouldn't you be? And she's telling a very particular version of that as well, and she is, the other half of that, of course, is this. Because really, the tension in the episode is, well, who was right here?
Yeah.
And as it turns out, it's almost got this little X-Files ending where, well, we didn't know they were right, but maybe they are right because they've got their energy going into these rings. And hey, who knows? Well,
I mean, in general, and we're going to see some of this in the next episode, the series is about the Federation coming in turn. This is a much more... Janeway is a much more moral relativism captain who is very much, we certainly had Picard and Sisko dealing with cultures that were not their own and having to respect their beliefs and all of that, but still as the dominant culture. That was as a majority taking in a minority and respecting who they were. This is about, in the Delta Quadrant, the Federation is the minority, and again, this is much more of the theme of prime factors or whatever it's called, but they don't have the numbers to have, at least in the Alpha Quadrant, the Federation has the numbers to suggest that maybe they have moral superiority or at least authority in the situation. They have nothing justifying any moral authority in the Delta Quadrant.
Right, they don't have anything, and I think that's key to the beginning of the episode as well, where once again, I mean, I like the fact that it starts out with this science thing.
Yeah.
Thought they've discovered a new element, and Janeway's geeking out over it. And then they go down and they find the bodies, and you see, I mean, because again, Voyager gets criticized for not doing character work, and maybe that's true later on. We'll find out. But I think in this episode, again, you get this sense that B'Elanna is someone who is not really standing on ceremony. She's not interested in an afterlife. She's not interested in anything. She's interested in, I don't know, I just want to do this and let's get it done and let's not worry about it. Whereas Chakotay is very focused on the ceremony of it, respecting their beliefs. And I think you get more of a sense of who those characters are in that one scene than...
she only sees really what her eyes and her sensors tell her. When he's saying, what do you know about these people? She basically lists off a couple of, chemical things, and that's about it. And he's saying, well, obviously they're ceremonial and they're naked, so they don't think they'll take possessions with them. And their arms are folded, so they were very carefully placed. And these type of things he's attuned to.
Which doesn't actually seem to be true, but anyway.
Yeah, that is a fair point. That said, he is much more, he is judging that by Earth customs, by, the customs of the Native American people as a whole, which this show seems to think exists. Either way, he is sensitive to ritual in a way which I think it's interesting that a Klingon is not sensitive to the ways of ritual.
Yeah, because, B'Elanna is not a very good Klingon.
Yeah.
I mean, that was kind of the point of that conversation she had with Harry Kim, last week, where they're talking about their families. And she's saying, well, my mother went back to the Klingon homeworld, and I never really wanted to deal with it.
So she was raised on Earth or a Federation human planet.
Right, I would assume so, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't think she was raised on Kronos.
Yeah, the opposite of Worf.
She is kind of the opposite of Worf in a way, actually, yeah, because she's a lot like K'Ehleyr.
Yeah, she wants to be her, she thinks that the religion of her people is stupid and restricting, and is just going to do her own thing and figure out her own moral compass. And it's an inconvenience in some ways, at least to K'Ehleyr it was.
Yeah, and I don't know that we know enough about B'Elanna at this point to know whether or not she thinks it's a hindrance or not, but she certainly is not a fan of it, at least.
I think it's just a culture that she was just very much not raised in and doesn't believe in, and frankly probably gets annoyed because people probably assume.
Right.
It's a Klingon holy day. She's going to get people wondering why she's not celebrating.
Now, I don't know if, you obliquely mentioned the show's, I don't know if I want to call it a problem yet, because I don't know if we have enough information or context, but specifically regarding Chakotay's quote-unquote Native American culture. And, you could make the argument, of course, that part of his respect to this alien culture and these bodies is a lazy character beat because he is supposed to be a Native American who stereotypically are one with nature and Earth and all that kind of stuff.
That was the implication. Again, what do you see about this scene? What can you tell from that? Seems like, all right, the Indian guide is showing me all about the trail and where these hunters were going. That it seemed a riff on that scene. I feel like the series means very well with him. It's really trying, and it's got its heart in the right place. And I don't even know enough and I'll be honest, I don't know enough to know if it is genuinely problematic or not.
Right.
It's not like it's not like a case where it's the Redskins and, is the team name offensive?
Naming him Redskin would be a problem.
Like if it was something like that, I'd say no, but I think it's just trying to be respectful, and I think there is a degree to which Earth doesn't really have nations so much anymore. Politically, in the Federation, there is Earth as a whole, as a unit in the Federation, and so I guess I don't know if that is part of the point, like where it is so far enough in the future that everything...
Well, Picard very strongly identified as French.
Yeah.
At least in the early part of TNG before they dropped that idea.
But just as Cisco identifies as coming from New Orleans and all of that, there is a difference between culturally where you're from and... a political entity. We assume that governance on Earth is done on a global level.
Yeah. But I don't know if that would translate in. I think that's probably a little bit of a stretch. I think it's just a white person not really understanding
that's
that there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of Native American cultures, not one.
And getting less by the day if President Trump has its way.
So, Harry Kim.
Oh, gee.
I am starting to think that the show does not want us to think that he is very good at this yet.
Yeah, I feel like
he should not have said a lot of what he said when he first got there.
No, I think they're trying, in this episode at least, they're trying to make Harry Kim the us character, right? Like, he's all new, he's wet behind the ears, he's fresh out of the academy, bumbling through, hasn't really memorized the real book, and I think this is supposed to, I think we are supposed to be identifying with him a little bit, especially in this episode.
Yeah. And I suppose it isn't fair to expect the ensign that's fresh out of the academy to be able to single-handedly handle a first contact situation.
Even recognizes that fairly clearly early on. He says, this is a first contact scenario. I'm in over my head here. He's not a diplomat. He's more of a science guy anyway.
Yeah, and it seems weird to me that the show simultaneously wants him to not be very good at this, and then also, I think in a certain sense, he doesn't. I mean, he recognizes that it's a delicate situation. He recognizes that his initial reaction to the situation was not the correct one. He's giving out way too much information. He's asking them questions that are giving away information that perhaps this culture has no idea about, in terms of, hey, I just came from this asteroid where all these bodies were from. Bodies?
Yeah.
What do you mean bodies?
Like, but again, before he asks that question, but I didn't think that would be a thing. Who would think that, people would think that their bodies would not decompose? I mean, everybody knows that happens. Every culture we've seen in the Federation has some kind of disposal of the bodies in mind. They know there's going to be bodies.
I mean, I don't know that we are necessarily supposed to think that they don't know that happens. I mean, I'm sure that people get murdered still, and people die alone in their houses and don't get found for 2 years. I mean, so I think that's, I don't know that we're supposed to think that they don't think bodies decompose, but I just think that they think that if you go into the cenotaph and you go off into wherever you're going, I mean, Harry Kim even concedes the point that it may be a different dimension.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the things I like about the episode is that it never answers that question.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very possible that
oh my God,
it was a different dimension.
What if the world of the Star Trek universe as we know it is the afterlife, which is why everything is so kind of nice, and then only Harry Kim has gone back? Is this my fan theory?
I think that's another one of your fan theories.
I love fan theories.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a good episode for Harry Kim. I think it grounds him in a real place, and I think that it gives him an opportunity to get off the ship for a little while, to rely on his own wits, and to level up in a sense.
Yeah, I was just about to say this. I mean, especially the ending when Janeway comes to him and says, like, you're off for the next couple of days. Like, you need to process this. As you get more and more responsibility, you're not going to have time for that. Like, frankly, I wonder what experience she had that she would have liked a couple days off to just kind of write a shitty poem about, or whatever, whatever. He's going to be playing his clarinet for the next 2 days, just composing a sonata about this. But yeah, this is about, he is, all of the people on the ship really have to grow up very quickly because they are in such an unusual situation. I always go back to that Miles O'Brien saying, I had 10 minutes to learn how and fix the transporter, and by God, I did it, and that's kind of where these characters are. We were flung 75,000 light years away, and we had to just make it work, and we did. So Harry Kim, I just randomly got transported into another dimension. I fucked up. I learned some really weird things about death. I died myself, and now here I am. And he's got to properly place that, but this experience will make him a more insightful officer, will make him a more competent. Well, he will have, and frankly, the woman that is on the ship for a little while says, like, well, I died once, what am I? Harry's going to have that experience too, right? He's died already, how are you going to hurt him?
That's true, yeah. And I mean, to this episode's credit, I mean, we did say it wasn't dark enough, but she does die.
Yeah, and that was...
Not in a horrible fashion, but she still dies.
Yeah. I think it's interesting how death is less of a thing in this episode, but I mean, think back to Tasha Yar dies, Dr. Crusher desperately tries to revive her and doesn't manage to. Pulaski brings somebody back. I don't remember. She brings somebody back to life, and it's talked about as it's this very intricate and complicated process that, again, even Dr. Crusher isn't quite at the level to be able to do. And now you have two people Harry Kim counts on, well, they're certainly going to be able to revive me in time, even if it's a 12-hour window or something like that. I think it's interesting that as we are going on, because this is about 10 years after the Pulaski method was invented, wasn't it?
I guess so, yeah. Well, a little less than that, but yeah.
Yeah, either way, it's had time to percolate and be programmed into the emergency medical hologram. I guess one last point about Janeway the scientist is that I like how willing she is to admit the limits of science. She says, when she's saying, we don't know what happens to your people or, all of that, but that doesn't mean there isn't somebody who doesn't. And at the very end, she is admitting to Harry there is more that we don't know than we do know. But as a scientist, she's trying. The Federation is just kind of chipping away little bits by bits and bits. And if it knows it's never going to get to the end of it, and it knows that we have a whole nother quadrant full of mysteries. They have chipped out. I mean, if you think about a fog of war situation around there, they've chipped such a tiny thing of the Delta Quadrant out, but that's exciting. That means more adventures. I think that this is a version of science that will always find mysteries.
Yeah, for sure. I think so. I think that's a good read on how the show is approaching the Delta Quadrant in general so far. And I think the other thing, too, of course, is that the episode is not really saying a whole lot about the afterlife, not really making a lot of statements on it, because I don't think that it would be in the show's best interest to do that. I mean,
no, if it for sure says the ambient radiation is a consciousness and we can talk to it and all, like if they had a conversation with the planet, that would have tanked the episode. This
is one of the central mysteries of humanity for as long as humans have been sapient life forms. And so for a random episode of a UPN show from 1995 to think they're going to solve it would not be the right thing to do. And so I think it shows a lot of restraint and it shows a lot of intelligence to make it a mystery episode, and to at the end of the episode to say, you know what, I don't know what is happening with these people. I don't know if they're in a different dimension or if they're just like 5 light years away. And frankly, I mean, it's kind of weird that these asteroids have atmospheres.
Yeah.
Asteroids don't
That's true.
have atmospheres. So that all is sort of indicative of the ways in which this episode is approaching this as well, I think.
And I will say that, yes, you're right. There is a lot that doesn't quite add up, but it does feel like it could. The end of the episode, they're left with, we have no idea, but it's working. It's doing something. This is how it is.
Yeah.
And, maybe their interpretation is right about it.
Yeah, I think so. All right, let's talk about prime factors.
And this was a very good episode.
I was, like I said, I was shocked. I was like, wait, how did I forget about this?
Is this the first great Voyager episode?
I think so.
Yeah. It was very much about something. It's doing the thing that episodes like The Drumhead and The Pale Moonlight have done, which is take this founding principle of the series.
Which I will stop you, though, because let's give Voyager some credit here. In the Pale Moonlight was 1998. This is 95.
Yeah.
This came before it. So
yeah, no, it's
I think
true.
that we need to get, I think that we need to, it's going to be a little difficult, I think, to remember that sometimes. But in terms of where Deep Space Nine was at this point, it was the 3rd season. So
yeah, if in the Pale Moonlight is an objectively better episode, we have to take into account that we also had 6 seasons to develop these characters, to get these people to this point, to have the fall from principles maybe that Sisko is doing have the effect. If we worry about Janeway falling into breaking her principles already, and this is only episode 8 or 9, that's very, you're right, that is a very we need to remember that.
Yeah, I think so. And I think one of the reasons why I was so shocked at how good Prime Factors was, again, is because I did not remember it. I mean, I'm pretty sure I saw it before, but it didn't really register. I think partly it's just developing critical faculties, but also looking at it with a critical eye. And I think that it really does combine, I think, all of the elements that so far are part of Voyager in a really, really, really well written and thought provoking episode.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got a weird science thing with the folding space. You've got the crew not really being sure about what they're doing or where they're going. You've got sort of tensions between, well, not really. I mean, sort of a little bit of tension between the Maquis and Starfleet.
Well, it's dealing with their relationships. It's
dealing with their relationships. I think it's also dealing with the very real fact that Voyager is alone in the Delta Quadrant as a Federation ship,
meeting a culture that's larger and more established than theirs is in this particular place.
And it also is a really, really nice Star Trek episode because it remembers that one of the things that Star Trek and the Starfleet characters always do is they are delighted by new cultures, they are delighted by new species, and they greet them with an air of trust and mutual cooperation and respect. I think that, it was just shocking to me to see the beginning of this episode, and I think part of it is shocking because we've just come off Deep Space Nine when this sort of trust was thin on the ground as the Dominion War went on and on. But Voyager's flying around. They get this distress call from this random ship from this culture they've never met before. The guy says, "Hey, you should come to our planet and party." And they're like, "You know what? Sounds like a great idea."
Yeah.
I don't know. I just appreciate that a lot.
Even though there is a major tense conflict between those, there is never the worry that this is going to end in violence. Frankly, even the guy who's like, "Yeah, I'll sell you the tech for all the literature." All he wants to do is expand his social capital by being the dude who brings a really huge library to the world. You don't get the sense that he's killing people or hurting anybody.
He didn't ask for some photon torpedoes.
Yeah, he's not peddling drugs. He's not, embezzling. He is just trying to bring books to people. I think there is a beauty to this. This culture is another mirror of the Federation because they are just as delighted to see another culture, to wow, new things. I mean, everybody's excited at the beginning of this episode. New food, new people, new stories, all of this cool shit we've never seen before. And yet, I think the significant difference between the two is the point that Janeway makes. You are looking for only the novelty. You really spend a couple days with the thing, and then you get bored with it when it's repetitive, where we are looking to make deep, lasting relationships that unfold over time, which everybody in Voyager is going to do because they are we'll talk about the beginning in a minute, but
yeah, because I think that if you wanted to find a mission statement for why Voyager just doesn't find a planet and settle down, it's that, because the relationships, the history that they have
not home.
It's not home. I mean, it's the people that they have left in the Alpha Quadrant, their society, their culture. They want to get back to it, and these people don't really understand that.
I mean, this episode went to a couple episodes ago when B'Elanna and Harry were talking, and she's like, "Oh, my friends are on the ship, everything." This episode even made B'Elanna wish to return home. And again, when push comes, I think a bit of the conversation with Harry was guarded, like, I don't have the option, so I'm making the best of it. There is no sense grieving over. But when she is given the opportunity to possibly get back home, get closer to home, help out the cause of the Maquis that she did pledge herself to, she gets excited about it, in spite of herself.
Was it Seska?
Yeah.
Who kind of convinced her to, I mean, because
Seska was the one, if I remember, she was the one who was talking to Chakotay, like, "Oh, whenever you're ready to rebel, I'm there." Seska really wants to die nobly for a cause. She wants to go out in a blaze of glory. She is looking for a fight. I think it's interesting that she, more than B'Elanna, is the hothead, and she's Bajoran?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
and not religious Bajoran, she doesn't have the earring.
That is true. She does not have the earring. I think that's an interesting point. But, Seska's a character, obviously, that the show is trying to develop a little bit. I'm glad you noticed her because she has been in a couple other episodes, and she's a good actress. I think that she's doing some interesting work. And I like the way that they're using her in this episode because, of course, I don't know. It's such a hard episode to talk about in a way because it's really two different episodes.
Yeah.
I mean, at the beginning of it is very sort of gee whiz, look at all this beautiful stuff and look, we can go to this planet and blah, blah, blah. And then Harry Kim discovers that they have the ability to fold space and they're 40,000 light years away from where they were. And, his head explodes. And of course it would. And then the next, 20 minutes of the episode essentially becomes a heist movie. And I think the key to that is the show smartly, because I've talked before about how Voyager gets criticized for ignoring the Maquis stuff, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that one of the ways in which Voyager is usually criticized is to say, well, they didn't do what I would have done with this concept, and so what they did with the concept is bullshit. Okay, like maybe you should move to Hollywood then and find out how easy it is to become a TV writer. Like, I
love doing that.
It's just, it strikes me as the sort of laziest criticism. And so what I think is really interesting with an episode like Prime Factors, which is dealing a lot with the Maquis, but it's dealing with it in a very Star Trek way. It's saying, yeah, okay, you know what? These Maquis people, Seska, B'Elanna, Chakotay, Janeway and the rest of the crew, as we've seen in these few episodes. I mean, the episode started out with them sitting around and Janeway smiling.
They're at the school cafeteria,
right?
And there is, it's a school where there are cliques, but they're not like hostile to each other. And you have the jocks and the geeks, and they're kind of friendly, joking back and forth to each other because they're there and they might as well.
But they've got that good-natured ribbing going on between B'Elanna and Starfleet, Harry Kim. It's stuff like that. And so you look at it and you say, okay, the beginning of the episode is them finally gelling. Janeway is finally, she's smiling at them nicely and saying, oh, isn't it wonderful that the Maquis and the Starfleet crew are finally gelling? And what I find so interesting about the way in which Prime Factors develops that further is not to artificially divide them, but to have Lieutenant Carey, the guy from the second episode of the show, who felt very strongly that B'Elanna Torres should not be chief engineer, was not qualified to be chief engineer. She's a Maquis. She's not Starfleet. She's not going to be able to do this job to the level at which it needs to be done. And, B'Elanna and Seska are sort of conspiring to steal this technology, and Lieutenant Carey shows up, who is one of the more Starfleet people that we've seen in the show so far, and saying, hey, I'm with you.
I'm in, yeah.
And I think that that's really what it comes down to, is that whatever the differences between, and I think the differences between Starfleet and the Maquis are overrated anyway, because the Maquis, yes, they're rebels or whatever, but they've not really given up the ideals and the culture of the Federation. They are not at odds with that. And we've seen, that in DS9, of course. And so to me, what it comes down to is that, these are not people that are rejecting Federation culture. These are people that are rejecting the Federation politics on a single issue.
They think in a way the Federation has rejected the ideals in certain ways. Certainly the bit with Eddington in DS9 was that they failed these people. And so, the Federation's laws don't even matter to them anymore. They've been rejected from that. Again, they could. Janeway isn't somebody who's enforcing the borders or anything like that. It's not like. Sure, maybe they would get into a heated discussion about whether or not the Maquis should exist. I think everybody on that ship is a little too smart to realize to fall for that trap. Again, it doesn't matter because it's 75,000 light years away, and so again, we're all here and we're not the enemies.
Right, and so I think that's why it's so nice for the episode to not only acknowledge that, but to allow other characters to go along with that as well. And because it's really like they are in effect gelling, not because they're stuck on the ship together, but because they all want to get home.
Yeah, and in a way, and I mean, for people like B'Elanna, it's very explicitly said to have grown a bit in this episode. She's changed. She is understanding the reasons behind all of this. very literally at the end, I think she gets a little bit of an appreciation for Starfleet safety protocol when the ship almost fucking blows up as a result of them testing this a little too prematurely. Like, certainly, oh, okay, maybe there was a reason for this. Maybe we should take this to the captain who knows science really well.
Well, that is one of the things that I think is most interesting about this episode, of course, is that no one on TNG would ever have done this. And DS9 maybe would have done this, but it would not have been someone in a Starfleet uniform pulling this shit. So seeing B'Elanna do this, seeing Seska do this, and seeing Lieutenant Carey help them do this at the end of the episode is shocking, because it does actually, I think, work, because they want to get home really desperately. They are 70 years from home. They are probably never going to see their loved one again if they continue to fly at warp 9 straight towards the Alpha Quadrant and stop for every little side quest that they get, every little exclamation point over a planet. And so I think that they're selling it really well, that B'Elanna's desperation at the end of the episode is, not only born out of a desire to get home, but also a sort of inability on her part to recognize why Starfleet has these rules and regulations in place, and also her own limitations. I mean, she pretty much goes, "Oh yeah, okay, I got this." This like bizarre technology that was only a vague theory 2 days before. Oh yeah, we've got this. Well, no, you don't actually.
Yeah, and what it turns out to be these antimatter neutrinos or whatever. Again,
anti-neutrinos.
This anti-technobabble term. She fully admits, like, we didn't even think about this. It's incompatible with Federation technology. Like, you get the sense that this doesn't affect Federation technology has never taken anti-neutrinos, because what good are they? And so, it's a total blind spot.
So I do have a question for you, though, about their entire approach to how they're thinking about how they're going to use this space folding technology. So they do say that the range of the technology is about 40,000 light years.
Well, at least 40,000 light years. That seems to be the furthest that they've gone.
Right. Well, that's my question. So they say, okay, we can only go 40,000 light years. That is the limits of the technology. Lieutenant Carey then says, well, there's no reason why we couldn't reconfigure it and then jump the rest of the way home. Okay, fair. So they can only do 40,000 light years at a time, but you can jump as much as you want.
They're about 80,000 light years from home, so they use it twice,
Now, of course, that doesn't turn out to be the case, because as it turns out, the planet's core is the power source for this technology.
So how do they get back?
Well, no, because they didn't jump.
No. But when they go to Orissa or whatever the planet is.
Oh, no, I just assumed that they have some sort of homing thing or something.
Yeah,
they're 40,000 light years, so it's both ways.
The platform pulls you, and it's still on the planet, so it can. Yeah, okay.
But my question for you is, once they figure out that they can only go 40,000 light years, and of course that would still cut 40 years from their trip, so it's not a bad thing.
And again, they can still start looking for wormholes from 40,000 miles. Yeah.
Well, they know that one exists, because the Gamma Quadrant wormhole exists, and the Gamma Quadrant wormhole is said to be 30,000 light years away from Federation space. So
why didn't
anyone mention that? Like, we could jump to the Gamma Quadrant wormhole and then just go to DS9?
Gamma Quadrant, are there any semi-friendly planets in the Gamma Quadrant they know about yet?
I don't think so.
Because even if they won't let them take Voyager around, they could say, well, beam us to that planet. Beam us to the planet where the red-faced people are. Yeah, they're not the nicest people, but they'll at least be, they'll at least, let us make a phone call.
Yeah, you don't need to take the ship with you. I mean, it's nice to take it, but, leave the ship, self-destructed, so no other alien technology gets a hold of Federation technology. Go to the red people planet from that episode of DS9, and then have them take you to the wormhole. I mean, then you're back. So, I don't know. Seems like a little bit of a...
No, it's fair. And again, it's... These people, and I forget their name, do come off as dicks for not, giving them a ride.
To some degree, yes.
I get, and even Janeway, admits that. All right, so you don't want. We understand why you wouldn't want your technology to accidentally fall into another's hands. We get if you don't quite believe that we're going to destroy it at the end. All right, but can you at least help us get that much closer to our? And again, he doesn't even ask.
I guess it's true.
That's the thing. If they had discussed it and still said, no, we have decided that still does go against our laws, that would be one thing. He had no intention of asking. It was boring. It's business stuff.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of those things that key to the episode, kind of the way in which it turns is that Gathan turns out to be, and I like the fact that I don't know if he's a dick necessarily, but I think that he's just more interested in his own pleasure than anything else. He does seem not to be necessarily a representative person on this. I mean, he's certainly, I think that he's a little bit sexually aggressive with Janeway. Janeway doesn't really seem to be super into it, but okay. But I also think that he is just the kind of character that is a little bit slimy. Yeah, frankly,
he's a trust fund hipster. Really, I think that's who I took a lot of these people to be. They are just kind of, money is no object. It doesn't really matter, and they want to just be having constant parties for their friends and everybody interesting that they see around them, and they're having a great time, and they don't want to do any actual work, and gee, that sounds boring, and can't you get yourself a ride home, and now that you actually need, that, I think that's the kind of personality they're going for with him.
I think so too, and I think also that key to that as well is the idea that they've never met the Federation before.
Yeah,
they don't know anything about the Federation. They don't know anything about Starfleet. So to them, it's just like, oh, well, it's a random ship of aliens that we've only seen this one time and we don't know anything about.
And they've stopped being fun. They really just, all they're talking about is going home and can we help them and let's have a meeting. And, those guys, just get out. Come on.
I mean, it is true that to a certain degree, the Federation is kind of a buzzkill.
He basically, because this is a version of Rising, Riker would enjoy the hell out of a week here. And they're all just, all right, well, we got to get home and let's see what, let's see what you got. And, can you help us?
But that's why the episode works so well, though. Yeah. Is that it fundamentally comes down to a difference in what these people think and what these cultures think a good life is. And as it turns out, they have wildly different ideas about what that is.
I mean,
because it's almost as, I don't know that it's even like they're bored by Voyager wanting to get home. I think it's just they don't understand the motivation.
Yeah, it's a lot of things. Frankly, most of they've also never dealt with somebody so far away. Anybody who visits this planet has traveled from a close enough star system that for example, lives on one of the planets that they have a teleport pod going to.
Yeah.
And so they're planning on going to stay forever, or they're going for a couple weeks of vacation and then leaving under their own steam to there. And really, these people don't have to deal with that. They either just get a new permanent friend or a friend for a couple of weeks and they learn some interesting stuff and they have a good time.
I think that's true.
A new book to read.
So, we need to talk about Tuvok.
Yes, we do.
Did you see this coming?
Yes and no, and I really like what they do with Vulcan in this episode, especially the ending where, he says, my logic was completely correct, but I was wrong.
He says, my logic was not an error. But I was.
Yeah, and what I think was very interesting about this episode is Tuvok does a much better job than DS9 did of attempting to justify Section 31. Janeway is somebody who has these very strong principles of what is acceptable to do in this situation. She desperately knows that she is dealing with, number one, I have certain principles, Federation principles I cannot break, and I promised this crew that I would take any available chance to get home. That is my number one goal. I mean, when she says, could I give this away? Could I give away this opportunity? To not break my principles. She knows that many of the crew will find that a bad excuse, and so Tuvok takes it upon himself, saying, in order to protect her from from either compromising the principles or failing in her mission, I'm going to take it upon myself. I'll take whatever consequences are. If I'm cast out of Starfleet because of this, if I'm in the brig for the rest of it, so be it. This needs to be done. I'm doing this to protect her. That is really Section 31's logic, isn't it? That the Federation has certain things that need to be done. Somebody needs to kill the fucking founders, and I don't want the rest of the Federation to actually deal with making that decision. I want to protect them from that, and so I'm going to poison the founders and let them take advantage of it. Tuvok is going to steal the thing, and, well, it's already stolen, and we're home already, so, Janeway doesn't even have to deal with that. And her response to that, which is very much in line with, which I think is a better justification for the rejection of Section 31 than Sisko did, is that you can use logic to justify anything, but it's my job to make these decisions. In a way, I'm in the captain's chair. It's my role to do this, and I need your logic. She doesn't need Tuvok to be a weapon that can go beyond the bounds of morality. She needs Tuvok to be the moral compass. She needs Tuvok to be the thing that keeps her from making these wrong choices, because it doesn't matter in a way who makes the wrong choices. She needs to prevent the wrong choices from being made.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I always have a little bit of a problem with Tuvok's actions in this episode, not because I think they're necessarily wrong. I think it's definitely a gray area, and it is the kind of thing where I don't know what the right thing to do honestly is.
Which is the point of the episode. None of these characters really know what the right or the wrong thing to do is, and they're
right.
I think they all realize that they're going to have to breach something in this situation.
Yeah, but I always have a problem. I mean, I have a problem with Tuvok's actions in this episode only because I don't know that they're that clear to me.
Okay.
I think that Tim Russ had a problem with this as well. It said in Memory Alpha I was reading about. I thought it was really interesting because one of the things that he felt was that it should have been made more clear that one of the reasons why Tuvok made this decision was because essentially Janeway was about to have a mutiny on her hands.
No, I didn't.
And I don't know that I would go that far. It didn't really seem to be rising to the level of mutiny for me. 3 people in engineering covertly deciding to trade Federation literature for a device isn't really mutiny. It's certainly not something that is great to do, and I don't think that Janeway is obviously thrilled that it happened. But I think that it's a little bit too far to call it mutiny or even close to mutiny.
Yeah.
And also, but that leaves me with, okay, well, what was Tuvok's real motivation here? And I don't know.
He talks at the beginning about maximizing efficiency of the crew, and this, Janeway's all happy to see the Maquis and everybody and the rest of the crew bonding because, again, she's the school principal in that scene, and she sees all the kids getting along, and that's a really nice thing. That makes her happy. Morale on the ship is good. A good ship morale is a really good thing, and just for herself, she enjoys that. Tuvok is all, well, this is an efficient crew, and she even jokes that when they're going on the planet, well, shore leave would help the crew efficiency. I think he is viewing from cold logic. He does seem to feel that, breaking this principle, because nobody is going to be hurt in this situation no matter what happens. The worst that happens is that this one guy becomes known as the guy who brought Federation literature to, again, it's not like it's bombs. It's not drugs. Nobody is going to get hurt in this scenario. And so if I have to bend this rule in order to make the most, in order to have a shot at getting us home that much quicker, even if it just cuts the time in half, that's the logical thing to do. I think Tuvok is still struggling with that, the role of logic in the world. Again, I get the sense, a little younger than Spock was in the main.
No, he's a lot older.
He is?
Yeah. So your entire point is
the actor
invalid.
Younger?
I don't think so. No, Tuvok is supposed to be like 100 years old, dude.
He still could be struggling with the role of logic. You do get the sense that that's a lifelong challenge for the Vulcan, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I
okay.
I feel like while I like the impetus to have Tuvok be the guy who does the thing, I don't know if the episode justifies it enough. I don't have a clear sense of why he did it. I don't know what his motivations are. I like the scenes that result a lot.
Yeah.
I think that last scene between Janeway, B'Elanna, and Tuvok in her ready room is probably the best scene of the show so far.
Yeah.
I think that Catherine Janeway is already a really, really great captain, and I think Kate Mulgrew is giving a fantastic performance, and I think she's doing some really good work on Voyager. But it seems to me that this undercut some of the logic of not to make a pun, undercut some of the logic of Tuvok's motivations in this to get to that emotional place, which is in itself maybe a commentary on Star Trek. I don't know, but
he could very easily, number one, he is explicitly asked to explain his actions. He is a Vulcan, so he is going to lay everything out logically, and so his emotion, his reasoning could have been made a little more explicit to justify this. Again, if preventing a mutiny was one of the reasons, why didn't he say during that?
Well, that's my thing. I think that whatever problems Tim Russ had with the justification for Tuvok's actions in this episode, and they apparently did change about 30% of it or something. I agree with him. I don't know why he did this. I mean, aside from, it had to be done, and I wanted to spare you from having to do it.
No, you're
all right.
It seems like they wanted to. This is the character doing an action to fit the theme rather than growing the theme out of a character's actions, if you know what I mean. In other words, we wanted to. I find during this episode very much, but this is going to be a thing I will do, I guess, until DS9 chronologically ends in this series. But I'm taking this as a further commentary on themes that Section 31 introduced. Section 31 really is a development of a theme that this episode introduced.
Right, but again, Section 31 was like 3 years after that.
Yeah, exactly. So, again, if anything, it's the opposite of how I'm taking it. It is hard to remember that this came first. If themes are being picked up, they originated here. I see more why he's doing it why he decides to do it himself as opposed to the kids, B'Elanna and whatever her name is, Casca and everybody.
Well, I think that I mean, the only way that I can really justify it in my own head is that to me, what that final scene in the episode really impinges, kind of hangs on, and that Tuvok's line about, well, my logic wasn't in error, but I was, is the Prime Directive. And they don't talk a lot about the Prime Directive in this episode, but they do mention it, of course. And
I'm not sure if the Prime Directive would even quite apply in this case, because they don't quite have warp, they have the equivalent.
Well, the Prime Directive is not always only about warp, but is also about not interfering in alien cultures unless they want to be interfered with. I mean, so they don't want to give the technology. You can't force them to give the technology. I think that at least for me, at the end of the episode, what it comes down to is that the Prime Directive is about the limitations of logic. It's about saying, you know what, we don't know what the results of this action, any action, are going to be. We don't know what the results of us giving these guys our literature and taking this thing surreptitiously are going to be. We can't cross that line. And so
they never hear of nuclear war, then they read a post-apocalyptic novel and it causes them to be violent.
I think what it comes down to for me, though, is that, because, Janeway came to them and said, we'll give you the literature. It doesn't have anything to do with the literature. The literature is not a Prime Directive issue. The Prime Directive issue here is because the Prime Directive is not always about the alien culture. It's also about Starfleet and the Federation and how it's going to affect them. And so to me, I look at this and I say, okay, well, Tuvok is able to justify this action because of logic. And what Janeway is saying at the end of the episode is that's not good enough. The Prime Directive is not only about logic. The Prime Directive is also about unintended consequences. It's about this. It's about that, right? And so what Tuvok does is say, I have all of the answers. I know exactly what's going to happen. And Janeway says, no, you don't. You have logic. You have your experiences. You have your knowledge. You have your extrapolations from data. But at the end of the day, you don't know what the results of this are going to be. and it's not your job to make that decision. It's my job, dude. I think that's what it comes down to, really.
It's interesting how many of these episodes are kind of downers. You know, a lot of them end with they're a little worse off than they were before, either because they've lost their fuel and tried to gain more fuel, or we had this opportunity to get home and it was snatched in front of our faces. In a lot of ways, the show is about the consequences of sticking to one's principles. They still live by the Federation principles, and even though they're worse off, that's not the reason they're living by the principles. It's not for gain. It's not for them. It's about, frankly, Janeway has to live with herself.
Right. Janeway has to live with herself. She's the one who's going to have to, she doesn't. No one on the crew has all of the information or the facts. Janeway probably doesn't even have all the information or the facts, but she is the one who, at the end of the day, is going to make the decision. She's the one who's responsible for them.
Well, as they say, all of the facts, anti-neutrinos are. Janeway would probably not have thought of anti-neutrinos either. She doesn't have nobody has all the facts. It's true.
Yeah. And I guess the final question before we wrap this episode up is, why didn't Janeway make Tuvok her first officer?
The other week, I think I thought that she was her first officer because of how close they are. They're the ones who are eating lunch together. He's kind of her right hand much more than Chakotay. Was Chakotay even in this episode?
I don't know.
Yeah. So
I think he was. Oh no, he brought Kess a pizza.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, I want a pizza. Yeah. If we view Picard and Riker as the kind of ideal captain for number one relationship, Janeway and Tuvok have much closer to that than she and Chakotay do. Chakotay and she are just kind of learning to know each other. Tuvok is the person that, again, she's bringing her problems, her pain to her, the one that massively disappoints her when he goes against her, the one that she calls her friend. I don't think she would call Chakotay a close friend yet. They just haven't developed their relationship to that point.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I think it was just the symbolic gesture from, again, in the pilot, we need to throw the Maquis a bone, so let's make their commander my first, and also a way of respecting him. He was the captain of his ship, and now he's not. Now his ship is gone. So, at least you're my first, and you will be acting as captain many, many times.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, you convinced me.
Great.
All right, well, if you have any thoughts on either of the episodes of Voyager we just discussed, please leave a comment on the post for this episode of the podcast at TrekAboutShow.com. You can check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TrekAboutShow. If you do not know what Patreon is, it is a way for you to show your love and support of this show through money. We are not in the socialist paradise yet, so we still do need to use these capitalist means sometimes.
We are Ferengi.
And it also supports our other podcast, Tuning In. We are releasing our episode on the X-Files episodes, Beyond the Sea and Genderbender this week. And
one of those was great.
I was going to say, at least one of those was great. We'll leave it to your imagination to find out which one. Social media, we're on it. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Trekabout Show is our username in all those places. And as always, please leave us an iTunes review for Trekabout. Next week, we are going to be talking about the strange